I am a huge fan of this time of year. While it is technically still summertime, for degenerates like me, it's the official kickoff for the fall. And what do I mean by that? It's the middle of August, it's still hot out. Well, here's what I mean. When I go to Walmart, the school supplies start showing up. And before you know it, the pumpkin spice stuff's gonna be all available at the coffee shops and the bakeries. And then the next thing I know, NFL preseason and training camps are on their way. And that means fantasy football is right around the corner.
TJ, how's the vanilla? All right. TJ, who's your mama?
But what does fantasy football and trading cards have in common? Stick around to hear my personal story about connections with collectibles. What's up, wrestling fans, trading card collectors? Welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Cards. So as many of you know, I'm a huge fantasy football fan. The NFL is really the only sport outside of professional wrestling, which is technically a sport, right?
It's still real to me, damn it!
And I would say that maybe if it wasn't for fantasy football, I wouldn't be as big of a football fan as I am. In fact, I run a fantasy football league strictly full of wrestling card degenerates, where the entry fee and the prizes, it's all wrestling cards. I'm pretty sure I've talked about that in previous videos and previous podcasts, but if you're interested in either joining the league or getting on the waiting list to get into the league maybe for next season, or if we have somebody drop off this year, leave a comment below and reach out to me on social media if you need help with those social media links. Those are in the show notes. Then we don't care about fantasy football. We don't care about football. All we care about is wrestling cards. That's what your channel advertises, and that's what we want. And if we don't get our way, we're going to cry about it and defend this belt in the Walmart toy section.
I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it.
You may also be saying, Zhan, you said it yourself last year, or year before, whenever that was. You talked about, along with the hype bros out there, about how football cards might be transacted and treated like fantasy football players. That is true. I did talk about that. And how did that turn out? Not very well, but we're not talking about that in today's video. I want to talk about a card that I recently purchased and how it tells a story, how it connects with me personally on several different levels. And I hope that many of you watching this, even if you don't care anything about sports cards or football, I hope you can enjoy this story and somehow relate the connection that I have and the things that I talk about, and use that inspiration to apply it to the way that you collect and the things that you have those connections with. So let's set the stage for this story. The year 2008. I'm casually watching NFL Week 1, like I typically would do, and then it happens.
Came up with the ball, but that's not the story. Tom Brady took a tremendous hit as he released that ball right on his left leg.
Tom Brady out for the season in Week 1. And right then, I knew something was going to be different about this year. And man, was I ever right. 2008 in the NFL was filled with storylines. Not only did we have the Tom Brady injury, but we had the retiring and unretiring of Brett Favre. And that then kicked off the career for Green Bay Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers. The Detroit Lions became the first team since 1978 to lose all 16 games in the regular season. Hurricane Ike forced a lot of games and a lot of teams to reconfigure and move around a lot. We had the famous tie game debacle between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Cincinnati Bengals. And we ended the year with a very memorable Super Bowl between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Arizona Cardinals. And that was thanks to one memorable circus catch by wide receiver Santonio Holmes.
Time goes to the back of the end zone, and it is...
Not to mention that Super Bowl was the final broadcast for John Madden, as he would retire just a few months later. But for me, the most memorable part of that 2008 NFL season was the kickoff of my fantasy football playing days. So we come off that Tom Brady injury. I come to work on Monday, and a coworker asked me to take over a team that the owner left. Are you kidding me? An orphan team in week 2? So I said, sure, I've always wanted to play. I thrust myself into learning about this game. I wanted to know every single thing I could. Crash course, learning everything I can about fantasy football. And I was learning on the fly in 2008, week to week. I started consuming as much content as I could. Podcasts, any videos. And in 2008, podcasts and video platforms talking about stuff like this, it's not like it is now. There were few and far between. Fantasy football automatically made every single player at every single game, every single team in the NFL relevant. It was like I went from caring about just the Buffalo Bills to caring about every single team by playing this game. And while I just missed the fantasy playoffs in that 2008 season, I was instantly hooked to this game. Now, fast forward to the 2009 season, during the off-season, the draft time, spring, summer, I'd been researching. I've been watching player tape. I've been looking at statistics. I was determined to get better and win at this game. And with that, let's introduce our first collectible and the connections I have with it. So here we have The first magazines, you guys remember magazines? Fantasy football magazines used to be huge. Maybe they still are. I don't hardly see them out because there's so much digital content out there for free. But here is the first ESPN fantasy football magazine with Larry Fitzgerald on the cover of it. And I also bought this one the same year with Larry Fitzgerald on the cover of it. And I know people collect and grade magazines, and these two magazines will be in my collection until I'm dead because I don't think they're worth anything. You know, people say coffin cards a lot of the times. These truly will be with me forever because I don't think they're worth much, if anything, but they're worth a ton to me. They represent so much, and I've kind of talked about why they mean so much to me so far. So I've been prepping all offseason. I've been reading these magazines, making cheat sheets, making notes, trying to determine what I need to do with the team, how I need to draft. So I head into my first ever fantasy football draft. But not only is it my first draft, it's a live draft. And no, I'm not talking about live online where you can chat with people. I'm talking about in person. One of those ones where you go up and write your player's name on the board type of thing. Talk about an experience, especially for our first time drafting. And it was at a Mazzio's pizza place of all places. What an experience that was. This was an 8-person team. I know that's not very many, but regardless, I was drafting at the 8-9 turn. And in that time period, running backs ruled the world. In fact, let me just go through some things in this magazine with you. So here's the ESPN Top 150 at the time cheat sheet that I tore out. I just kind of used it for reference. As you can see, it's not marked on or anything. And I kind of wanted to keep it that way for preservation purposes. But let's run through. So I had pick 8. Let's run through the 9 at the turn. We'll run through the top 9 picks. Number 1, running back, Adrian Peterson. 2, Michael Turner, running back. 3, Maurice Jones-Drew, running back. 4, Matt Forte, running back. Steven Jackson, running back. Number 6, Chris Johnson, running back. LaDainian Tomlinson, number 7, running back. 8, D'Angelo Williams, running back. And then we get to Larry Fitzgerald at number 9. That's the first receiver. And then, you know, there's a spattering of running backs. Quarterbacks don't even come off the board for a little bit. It was very interesting the way that fantasy football was perceived and how the NFL was running as a league in 2008. So again, running backs were always that go-to. You wanted to get as many good running backs as you could on your fantasy team, right? But after doing a lot of research during that offseason, and after kind of watching the way the NFL was going, the way the league was evolving a little bit, making some mental notes and some mental predictions, I went a different way. And at the turn of the 8-9 pick, I took Larry Fitzgerald and Houston Texans wide receiver Andre Johnson. The room went silent. Nobody could believe that I went with this strategy. Nobody does that. You've got to get all the running backs. You got to get those running backs early and often or else you're going to lose. Fast forward several months and I win my first ever fantasy football championship. Sure, the prize money, that was nice. But what was more important to me was the payoff. The payoff of all the hard work and all the research that I had done during that whole offseason leading up to that one fantasy Super Bowl. And since that year, I've been playing in multiple fantasy football leagues and playing daily fantasy every single year since then. In fact, this year, 2023, will mark my 15th year of playing fantasy football. I can't believe it, honestly. It makes me feel old, and it's crazy to think that I've been playing this game for that long. Every single year I've been playing, no kind of breaks or kind of slacking or anything. No, I've been in at least 2 to 3 leagues minimum every single year, and I've never quit playing daily. So let's introduce another collectible to this story. And the whole reason that we're doing this video in the first place. Remember who I said I drafted with my first 2 picks in that very first fantasy football draft that I did? Remember who was on the cover of these magazines that are also collectibles? I saw this card, had to have it. Let's talk about it. This one right here, 2009 Playoff Prestige League Leaders, numbered out of 25, Larry Fitzgerald, Andre Johnson, dual game-worn jersey swatch card. So let's connect the dots between fantasy football, this card, and why it's so important to me. The card was produced in 2009, which is the first year that I actually started playing a full complete season of fantasy football and had my first draft. Not to mention the first year that I won the league. It featured both players on a single card that I took with my first 2 draft picks at that 8 and 9 turn. My first 2 draft picks ever in fantasy football. The card is numbered to 25, which, okay, so maybe there's not that many out there, but that's not really what makes this card important. I mean, I guess if you want to get really nerdy about it, The card number is 23 out of 25. And since I bought this card just a few weeks ago, it's in the year 2023, and 2023 does mark my 15th year of playing fantasy football, so a little bit of a tie in there with the number. And another key feature on this card is that it does feature 2 pieces of game-worn memorabilia. We all know how game-used or ring-used has become a real rarity in the hobby, it seems. Event-worn and player-worn memorabilia pieces in the hobby have just kind of taken over. Unfortunately, they're the norm in most modern releases. And since that card was released in 2009, I could be completely wrong here, but hypothetically, I'm thinking that maybe these 2 pieces were from the 2008 season, which in that thought process is the year that I started playing fantasy football, when I took over that team. And another connection that this card has with me, and it's kind of irrelevant to fantasy football, it's just a life in general thing, going against the grain. Nobody back then was going wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver, or wide receiver, quarterback. Again, running back, as much as you could get on your team, people wanted running backs. Just like how back in the day, people used to say, oh, wrestling's fake, nobody cares about that. Yet arenas and stadiums continue to be filled to this day, doing bigger numbers than ever before. People used to say, oh, wrestling cards, that's a novelty, that's non-sport. It goes over there with the Alf and the Dick Tracy cards. Wrestling card content, nobody's going to care about that. Wrestling cards, nobody's going to care about that stuff after the pandemic. Yet here we are, still kicking, still thriving, still having fun, still going against the grain. So wrapping all of that together, that's why that I can buy this card, this collectible, and I can connect with it on so many different levels personally. This card will be a permanent fixture in my PC. It really is amazing that we can build these unlikely connections with collectibles. Collectibles for many people, and the whole reason people collect them in the first place, even maybe things that aren't necessarily meant to be collected, but people do, they're important because they can represent times in history, different places, and different memories of our lives. And most of the time, those memories and that connection are actually more important than the item itself. The item's just kind of a reminder, and it's something we can look at when we're down or when we're really busy in life. You can look at that card. You can look at that magazine, you can be like, man, I remember this reminds me of this, whatever it is. Not about how much it's worth, not about what you can flip it for, not about what the market says or prospecting. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I know it was a little bit different, but I just really want to drive home the connections that we have with collectibles. And I hope my story has inspired you to kind of do the same thing. Take a minute and learn about your connections with collectibles. Maybe it's stuff that you already own that you can tell the story kind of like I have today. Or maybe it's items that you see out there in the future. You remember watching this video and it triggers that emotion and that connection that you will have with these things. And you'll pick it up and then you'll have a permanent memory. If you enjoyed today's video, hit that subscribe button, give me a like, and spread the word about this channel. And also, before you get out of here, leave a comment below of maybe some stories you have with connections with your PC. Maybe if it's too much to type, you can reach out to me on social media. Maybe if it needs to go even further than that, you can send me a DM or an email. Again, all the links in the show notes for ways to get a hold of me. But hey, maybe we get you on this channel. Maybe we let you tell your story, your connection with your collectibles. I know I would, and I'm sure other collectors would like to hear other people's stories. And when you're done leaving a comment and checking those links in the show notes for all the ways you can help show your support for my content, click the videos on the screen for more wrestling card content, hobby content, interviews, and much more in the archives of this channel. Until next time, see ya.